A very good Breeders' Cup Thursday. Stats Raceland users, prospective users, Breeders' Cup fans. We're coming to you live from Del Mar, and probably for at least, maybe 90 minutes. We're looking forward to a discussion of the Breeders' Cup. And if ever there is a set of races where Raceland absolutely is an invaluable tool for you, this will be it. Helping us, of course, again tonight, Craig Walker's going to be here, and Dan Tordjman, and virtually everybody is here or on their way to Del Mar. The weather finally has gotten nice, and we should have 2 fabulous days of racing. Craig, starts with you. Good afternoon.
Hey, Steve. Yeah, this is, of course, 2 of the greatest days to be a handicapper, and there's a ton of work to be done, but with Racelands at least helps you get organized and kind of help you handicap these 2 days and not have run out of time like sometimes in past years how it's been. I just all of a sudden the races are here and I feel like I haven't prepared enough. So Racelands helps make a dent in that for sure.
We'll show all the different tools that are at everybody's disposal and how to utilize them. And even if you're still just getting used to poking around and using the tools at your disposal, you'll get a feel, and you can always come back and see all the things we're going to show you tonight. Certainly Dan Tordjman has used it to great advantage. Dan, I haven't seen you today, but I have seen you this week.
Yeah, it's been absolutely spectacular out here. I was just talking about the weather. I know the weather was a concern earlier in the week when I got in on Sunday. It was a little cool, and then Monday and Tuesday morning we had some overcast skies and a little bit of drizzle. But it doesn't look at this point that the weather will be too much of a challenge, and I'm just absolutely pumped for this weekend. To echo some of the sentiments that Craig expressed earlier, just with the fact that with stats, I mean, I have never felt more prepared in my life for any Breeders' Cup. So whether that translates into winners remains to be seen, but I'm going in a lot more confident knowing that it would have been a lot harder for me this year to miss out and miss some angles that I might have missed in previous years. Also, what I find most useful when using stats, and I tell this to people all the time, not just because we're on a webinar right here, kind of showing off Stats Racelands, but what I tell people all the time is that the research functions here, the research tools, which we'll get into in a little bit, are just so useful and so helpful, especially when trying to figure out, how a lot of trainers do shipping in, how, when you're looking at some of the juvenile races, when you're trying to just very quickly assess pedigree and who might be ready to win early and to win a race or races like we have coming up this weekend. There are so many valuable tools just at the tip of your finger. So I'm totally pumped. And as I tweeted earlier today, if the amount of work that you put in is any indicator of success, I'm fairly confident that I'm going to sweep this card this weekend. So all the big races. So let's do it.
Well, of course, the beauty of these 2 days, and this is something I always put on my written analysis, these are 2 days that are challenging. They can be very maddening, and you can have the right opinion and find yourself deep into Saturday having not cashed anything significant.
Exactly.
But it only takes one hit on these 2 days to get you even or even get you out for the whole weekend. You put a couple tickets together, you get into a sequence of a pick 3, even a pick 4, and the opinions within that sequence, you get right a few times, and suddenly it's become one of your best couple of days of horseplay. So don't get frustrated. Make sure, I'll get this out of the way now, something we talk about on the radio when it comes to these kinds of days, and this weekend in particular. Make sure your account is funded. If you're playing tomorrow, obviously you will, but if you're only going to play Saturday, make sure your account is funded ahead of time. Don't wait till Saturday and run into a problem. Make sure that you've got money on the sidelines to use against your best opinions for the weekend. Don't get to the juvenile or the mile or the turf or the classic, the last few races on the weekend, and realize you're underfunded and that you figured, oh, I'll cash something along the way. Make sure that your money is ready for the opinion you have the highest degree of confidence in, and keep firing and don't get frustrated. It's easy to do, but when the hit comes, you'll know that everything was worthwhile. Let's start. We'll start on Friday, of course. We're going to get to about at least half the races, and we'll go to the Juvenile Turf, which, it's funny, is maybe one of the turf races on the weekend. It struck me as maybe the most inscrutable. A little bit of a dog's breakfast, frankly. I think there's no combination, Dan, of horses that is going to surprise me with the Euros and with some very good domestic horses. What are you doing in the Juvenile Turf?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there are a number of different directions you can go here. Just to kind of give an overview of the race, this is a race that at least over the past decade has really favored the Euros, as a lot of people know. Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore specifically have teamed up for 3 wins here, and they've got Mendelssohn, who's drawn the rail. He's also, if you just, and we'll get to more of him in a bit, but as you can see here, the top Equibase speed figure for anyone in this race. So Mendelssohn is certainly a threat coming in from overseas. You've also got, several in here in terms of the U.S. contingent that are appealing and interesting, and one in particular that caught my eye is Catholic Boy. This is a horse that has been a little bit of a buzz horse this week for trainer Jonathan Thomas, who's not a very, I would say, well-known, or he's not one of the household names, but for those who know him, he's a guy that inspires a lot of confidence, and he's certainly extremely confident in this horse, who last out in the With Anticipation, I think we'd have to say, ran probably one of the best races we've seen any 2-year-old run on the turf this year. And what I wanted to do was actually take a look at that race. And so, very quickly or very easily, you could pull up race replays as well as the charts. You'll see here that Untamed Domain, a horse that we'll come back to, I'm sure, at some point here, a horse who won Next Out, was also in this race and finished 3rd, as well as Seaback, who came back to win. I'm mispronouncing that name, by the way. I forgot how Larry Cole mispronounced it, but it wasn't Seaback. Also wanted to point out here, if you're looking at the prior races, you'll notice on the right side here at a couple different points, I'm going to show you that there is an indicator that shows you when a horse experienced trip trouble. But let's just go here to Catholic Boy and hit play. I just drop that a bit. And so this is Catholic Boy right here. He's the 3, and you'll see essentially what happens here as the race unfolds. First of all, he did break slowly. As you can see, he got shuffled back a little bit. And he gets himself into a little bit of trouble, and you'll see more of that as they come off the final turn and they turn for home. And you're going to see the poise that this horse shows, which to me is impressive for a 2-year-old, in getting through that trouble and kicking through and just really showing a lot of guts to do it. See if I could speed this ahead just a bit so we don't have to take a look at the whole race. And, well, there you go. I mean, I don't know if that was clear, but he literally had to steady, came through, and now is still kind of bowling his way through. And you'll see this flourish that he finishes with here. So, again, just on the merit of that replay, I think he's been a bit of a buzz horse this week. A number of people have spoken about. He's 12-1 on the morning line. I do not think you're going to get 12-1 on Catholic Boy, but he's one who's caught my eye. Another thing I want to show you, and I mentioned trainer Jonathan Thomas, we could do these searches here to figure out, how their horses might do. And again, especially if it's a trainer that you're not familiar with. So I'm going to go in here and modify the search criteria, and we'll look at a horse that's been away for 61 to 80 days over the past 5 years, and then take a look at, I'm going to remove the wearing blinkers right there. Let's see all horses fitting that criteria. You see 18 starts, 5 winners, and 13 in the money finishes. That's a 72% in the money percentage. So, I mean, that's got to add a little confidence if you've already liked the horse. Really good numbers for Jonathan Thomas. They're bringing horses back fresh, and this horse seems to have a world of talent. So, Catholic Boy, it is for me. I'm going to quickly mention 2 other horses that caught my eye. I did mention Mendelssohn earlier. I will say a couple of other things about Mendelssohn. This is a $3 million half-brother to Beholder. He ran his best race last out. Let's see, and I circled it right here in the Dewhurst. So, you know, he's coming in great form, clearly. He was second prior to that. Yeah, well, in that last race, the U.S. Navy Flag, who would have been the favorite in this race, but he opted for the Juvenile. So again, he's running in good company. He ran a huge race last out, and as I mentioned again earlier, Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore, those are the names you want, especially in this race. And you see there change on Lasix. So would imagine that will help as well. And the other horse I wanted to take a look at, let's see, is right here, Sands of Mali. This is a horse that you probably won't hear many people talk about. His European form is a little up and down, but you can see here he does have a few good races, including the race at York 2 back when he posted the 113 here. He's a Group 2 winner. But what I like about him is that he's got a little bit of speed, and for me at least, and I'll pass it over to Craig here in a moment, for me at least, there doesn't appear to be too much speed in this race, or any sort of obvious speed. Not only does he have speed, but he also gets the top local turf rider in Flavian Pratt. And so would imagine that Pratt would know, first and foremost, you know, what kind of horse he's inheriting, and also would be the guy that you want to guide a horse to the lead over the turf track here at Del Mar. So anyway, with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Craig, and I know Craig has a few other thoughts about how this race might unfold. So let's see if we can do that. All right. Let me know if that worked for you, Craig.
Yeah, I clicked on it, so it should be coming up.
All right.
Can you see it now?
Got it.
Okay. So I also was, or am, a big proponent of Catholic Boy. I hadn't seen the race like Dan did, but just from everything that was going on in the morning with this horse, just watching that's one good thing about the Breeders' Cup is their website, breederscup.com, does do a good job for people who, like Steve and Dan, are at Del Mar. For someone like me who's not there, they have every morning 3 hours of showing workouts and gallops and, you know, all the Breeders' Cup horses on the track. So they do a great job of following those, and they also, the workouts, they also archive the workouts on the Breeders' Cup website too, so someone can go and review all those. So if you're into that, it's a great resource to use during the Breeders' Cup. And so this horse, he just looked awesome on the track. I also read clockers reports and different things, and I know one of the DRF clockers said that this horse is a 2-year-old in a 3-year-old's body, and the horses just looked really great on the track in the morning. The other thing that I like about the horse is when a lot of times in Racelands, when I'm looking at these situational statistics, so these are things that are going on today. So under the trainer name, it has how he's done the last 30 days with today's jockey. which would be Manny Franco, the distance and surface. So this is a turf route, 2-year-olds, etc. When you see that the default settings have everything for green when they're highly above average. So when you see all these win percents and the ROIs all in green, you know that all these different categories are checked off that this trainer wins with these types of horses. So that's always a good sign to me. And it's one of the great things about Racelands, because sometimes I'll be handicapping and I'll not really pay attention. I'll just be looking at the running lines, and then sometimes I'll notice that, oh wait, there's a lot of good things going on for this horse, and then I'll go take a closer look at him, because there's been times before Racelands was around where I would have missed the horse, but then now I might throw that horse in, or at least take a second look and put him in my pick 3s and pick 4s and things like that, and it's been a great help. The other thing too is as Dan talked about too, is besides the charts, when you click on the dates, we also have the key races. So key races is for the default. It's if at least 3 horses come out of a race and win the next race. So this green 6 here, because it's the race number, it'll be green with the defaults. You can change that to something that highlights it more. So like Ella Star has changed it to a filled-in blue circle, and so that you can easily do that in Racelands. And when you click on the chart, you'll see that there were 4 horses out of the maiden race that all came back and won. And of course, Catholic Boy was one of those horses. And then, as Dan had pointed out before, 2 horses have already come out of the with anticipation stakes and won. So what's good about this, it means that this horse is running against horses with winning attitudes, and that's very often not the case with a horse that just broke its maiden and ran one other race. But this horse is running against winners. So even though when you compare them to the Europeans, the speed figures are on the low side, because one thing that we can always look at is the class rating of the race will show what the likely speed figure is going to be around the ballpark number, 116 in this case. This horse, with the trouble he had last time, with the way he's looking on the track in the morning, and with facing so many winning horses, he's just got so many positives as far as the trainer goes. He's just, I think, a great bet for Breeders' Cup week, and so he's definitely going to be one of my key plays for the 2 days. The other horse I liked was the one that Dan mentioned. One thing I like is that this horse earned the big number, as Dan said, of 118. And then also another good thing is that Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore is his main jockey, and especially when they come to America. So over the last 5 years, they've had 30 starts together, and they've won 17% of the time and a positive 38% ROI. So that's a good sign for them. And then the last horse that I like in this race is Encumbered. And one of the things I like about him is how well that trainer Simon Callahan does with 2-year-olds. He wins with a positive ROI of 11%. And the other thing I like is that the horse has been training at Del Mar. That's the same thing with Catholic Boy. So you see here the workout on the 28th. I mean, there's only four horses. It was a bullet. But what I like about it is, just for me on this Breeders' Cup, Del Mar has been such a quirky track this year that I'm just going to, my A horses and most of my races are going to be horses who have been training at Del Mar, who got here last week and have been galloping on the track and then have had a workout on the track. I just think that that's going to be a positive this year. Was there anyone that you had a strong opinion on, Steve, this race?
Well, I'll add a little background. Jonathan Thomas was a longtime Todd Fletcher assistant. He started to go out on his own and had trouble attracting clients. Instead, he went to work for Mr. Malone at Bridlewood Farm in Ocala, and that has been a terrific circumstance. In addition, of course, to Bridlewood, he has gotten a lot of attention and a lot of support from Aaron Wellman at Eclipse. And that part of that is Aaron Wellman's business with Bridlewood and, the partnerships on the horses that they've gotten together on. Jonathan Thomas is basically the trainer at the farm that starts the yearlings and the homebred. He trained Taprit and every other of the Bridlewood and or Eclipse horses that have gone on to various success. Carolina, another one that Jonathan Thomas developed. He's now getting a chance, started at Saratoga this summer, started to get a chance to put horses in his name in the afternoon, courtesy of particularly of Aaron Wellman. And he's a terrific guy. He's a terrific horseman and very, very capable. So when you're not betting an unknown here, you're betting someone who's got as good a pedigree as a horseman can have, and you can bet him with a lot of confidence. They're very excited, rightly so, for Mr. LaPenta, for Catholic Boy. Certainly drew well. They didn't want to be much past the 4-hole, so getting the 4 was very, very much a satisfaction for them. We were for some reason concentrated on domestic horses. You cannot approach this race without talking about Sands of Mali and Massar and James Garfield. I mean, these horses have kept great company. The boys race has been, really a strong area for the Euros. They haven't fared as well in the filly races. In fact, some short-priced juvenile filly turfers have been upset in this race. But those 3 Euros, they've all got my attention. And the horse I'm actually going to pick and key off of is Snapper Sinclair. Snapper Sinclair, you watch the two wins, and they were accomplished when it comes to a pace scenario. He's a horse that shows real versatility and tremendous maturity for a 2-year-old. I mean, for a horse to close into a slow pace and to attend a decent pace and finish, that's attractability that comes in really handy. And I cannot let him go postward at 15, 18 to 1 on Friday without some money. So I'm going to key off of him. And a horse that, if you want to look at your pedigree information using Racelens, you're going to see positive turf influence for Flame Away. And one of the things that is amazing me about the lack of interest Flame Away seems to have, he's supposed to have been running on grass all along, and he's been rained off twice. And yet he's won his way here in the Bourbon with the win in you're in at Keeneland, and he's going to finally run on the surface he's intended to. And he already is running the kinds of figures and races that make him competitive even before you move him up as a potential horse with turf prowess. So at 15 to 1 and 20 to 1, I have got to use horses like Flame Away and Snapper Sinclair. To me, this is a wide open group. That Sands of Mali, that's a horse 30 to 1 that's going to probably be cut in half and be around 15, 16 to 1 as well. And I mean, to me, any opinion, any kernel that you see in this group, don't be shy, because there's nobody special in here. Make no mistake. And if you like something and there's a horse that is calling your name, bet him, and bet him with vigor. We'll turn to next, and from the Juvenile Turf, we'll go to the Distaff, and the Distaff has got a definition to it that's pretty clear. When we have mares, the likes of Stellar Wind with her last shot at a Distaff win, as John Sadler continues to look for his first Breeders' Cup victory. Then we look at Forever and Bridled. Both of them have been campaigned gingerly with this spot in mind. You then have all the upstart 3-year-olds, and they've all got merit. whether it's the pro tem leader in the clubhouse, Abel Tasman, the up-and-comer in the late, the resurgent Paradise Woods. There's a lot to like about the 3-year-old fillies against the 2 mares. Craig, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so for me, there are a couple things that kind of triggered me into this race that I'm going to end up making a sizable key on a horse and invest a lot of money on a horse. And it's one of the 3-year-olds that you mentioned. It's Paradise Woods. So one thing, when we go to the True Odds module for this race, there was a feature that we added recently that helps find possible lone front runners, or also possible pace scenarios where there's a lot of early speed types, or horses that are early speed and presser types, a lot of them in a race, and the pace looks like it'll be pretty solid, like it won't be a slow pace. So we highlight those scenarios now. That was something that some of our customers requested, and we looked into it, and we found some good data, and so that's why we have one in this race. And the one here is the lone speed leader is Paradise Woods. So it's projecting to have the lead, and you can see it's the number 7. It only has it with a slight lead early, and then a nice lead in the middle of the race. So we'll see how that plays out. As far as the PPs for the horse, one thing that I like a lot is the way that the let me just jump to it. Sorry. The way that the horse has been training. So this is another horse that's been at Del Mar for a few days, and you can see the workout on the 28th. The horses look dynamite on the track. So because it looks so well, I'm not really worried about the poor race that it had at Del Mar. So as I said before, horses who have been here and worked on the track, I'm going to prefer those horses, or horses that have had success and won races at Del Mar too, of course, anything like that. But I think the horses who have trained here these last few days are going to be better. So this horse does have a couple nice races. The 2 bad races I think can be explained. So I'm not too worried about them. Dan will talk about that a little bit more. And just for me, of all the workouts that I've seen, I mean, this horse was the one that looked, just on the gallops and the works, that looked physically the best to me of any of the horses. And so I'm just really going to key this horse mainly. But like Steve said, there's just so many good horses in this race. So, I mean, I will have, in some of the horizontal type bets, I will have to cover myself. And so I'm going to use a late, sorry. So late has just looked very good lately. Abel Tasman did beat it by a head a couple races back. But this horse looks like it's on the improve. One of Ellis Starr's angles that comes with race lens showed up in this race, and this is a 3-year-old against older horses in graded stakes. But it's not, the name is that, but it has some other aspects to it, and I just want to look at the criteria real quickly. And you can see this is something that Ellis had put in, 8 or 9 months ago, and it was doing well. And these just show the last 365 days. So basically what it is, it's not just a 3-year-old versus older, it's that the 3-year-old won both of the last 2 races. So you can see the last race back and the second race back. Also that the speed figures have been improving each time the last 3 races. So there isn't a lot of starts there, but you can see that almost every one of these types of horses runs well. 7 out of 8 times they've hit the board, and you can see a high ROI. So this is one of the types of specialized angles that some people say the sample size is too small, but I still think if the percentages are big, they're still angles you want to play, and so that's why I like that horse. And it's another horse that also has been, when you look here on October 29th, it's been training at Del Mar. And then just the last horse I'm going to put in the cover is Able Tasman. And that's basically because, the horse has been running well all year long, and it did beat Elate by a head in the coaching club, American Oaks. So, I'm playing Paradise Woods heavily, but I'm going to cover with the other two. And, of course, I can still get beat just because this field of horses is so good, but that's just the why I'm playing the angles. And so I will pass it over to Dan. Okay, Dan, you should be able to grab it.
Give me a second here. Okay, should be back on me. Are y'all seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and you said you could still get beat. I could say we could both still get beat. I also like Paradise Woods, and the reason we could both still get beat is because when the pace looks as predictable as it does in this race, oftentimes that's when the unpredictable happens. And so just because we think Paradise Woods is going to be out in the lead, loose, kind of loping along, doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. And in fact, just being out here this week, I had a chance to speak to Peter Urton, who trained Champagne Room, and he's made a couple of curious comments. I think in essence what he's tried to say is that, obviously they've got one choice from the rail, and that's, pretty much to fire right out of the gate. As you can see here, Champagne Room shows speed and is generally forwardly placed. And don't forget, again, if you look back here to last year, that this was a horse who won the Juvenile Fillies. Extremely classy horse, and she's only raced twice this year. But basically, what Urton said was that if Paradise Woods wants the lead, she's going to have to come and take it. And, if she wants to go head-to-head and battle with my filly, well, then it's going to get ugly. And that's verbatim what he said. It's going to get ugly. So, essentially, she's going to leave Paradise Woods with the option of clearing her, but Paradise Woods may have to do some work. All that being said, I am also still on Paradise Woods because I think she's fast enough. And I agree with something that you pointed to a moment ago, which is that her bad races aren't really as bad as they seem. And I mentioned, if you see here on the right side of the screen, the trouble indicator, a really handy tool that Stats Race Lens provides. That little red upward arrow there shows you that she stumbled at the start here in the Torrey Pines. This was sort of the race where I think a lot of people jumped off of Paradise Woods. She comes back from a Derby, from an Oaks, in which she obviously disappointed as the short price favorite, but felt she definitely had an excuse there as well, as she dueled an insane pace duel with Miss Sky Warrior through the early part of the race. And so coming back in the Torrey Pines, expectations were high that she would bounce back, and she didn't. But again, if you look at the way she started and the fact that she's clearly a horse who needs the lead and who wants the lead, and kind of being behind the eight ball in that spot. We don't have to watch the replay. If you get some time, you can go ahead and check it out. That obviously had her up against it. But when she comes back and wins the Zenyatta as dominantly as she did, I think it really speaks to the kind of filly that this is. And so for me, I think that assuming she breaks clearly, I think she will clear. I think she'll get to the lead. And interestingly, when you pulled up the true odds, and I will say I love this new tool here, this Lone Speed Leader tool. Generally, you can identify it if you're watching replays and if you're taking a close enough look. But hey, if this is going to make it simple enough and you don't have to go through all that, then this is a great tool to have. I will say what I find interesting here is that it has Able Tasman up close. So this is one of those question marks when it comes to pace here, where I think you got to maybe take a closer look and say, okay, well, maybe Paradise Woods clears, but Able Tasman, she's run some quirky races of late where, you know, she hasn't broken well. She's been rushed up. She's looked like she's wanted to go. And you see here, I mean, she's on the lead. I mean, when she hasn't been on the lead, she's been moved early enough, and you know, it got her beat last out. So where is she? I mean, she'll be close up. She will be. You got to believe she'll be in a forward position. So, you know, how early does she move, and what does that do to Paradise Woods? So there are some questions here, no doubt. But again, still going to stick with Paradise Woods because all in all, I come away with a lot of the same feelings that Craig does. I'll just mention one other horse. Super, super classy, Forever Unbridled. Only 2 races this year, but she's made them count. She'll be remembered, of course, for beating Songbird in the personal Ensign, thanks largely to a really heads-up ride by Joelle Rosario. She's a 3-time Grade 1 winner and has won 3 of her last 4 graded stakes at this mile and an eighth distance. Her only loss was in last year's Distaff. So this is a horse who shows up every time. This is exactly, you know, she's ready for this, and I would think that she's going to fire a huge race. So we might be overlooking what really is sort of an obvious horse here. And you know, we haven't mentioned Stellar Wind either, at least in any great detail. When it comes to class, though, you know, those are the 2 horses. And then, you know, we did mention Elate, who, you know, again, being on the grounds here at Del Mar all week, she has definitely been the talk of the track. She's looked incredible moving over the track here. And Bill Mott, I think we know his history in this race. He has won this race 5 times, I believe, which is the most clearly of any trainer ever in the history of this race. And so, you know, if anyone knows how to win this race, it's Bill Mott. With that, Steve, what are your thoughts?
Well, I ended up, it's very funny, I ended up picking Forever Unbridled, and I certainly didn't come here expecting to. But when you look at the pace, when you do look at the pace projector, there's some circumstances that make a case that the pace ends up getting hot. And as crazy as that is, because a week ago, every indication was that Paradise Woods would be on a loose lead. And that's one of the reasons that it's always valuable not to let preconceived notions creep into your handicapping mind. They got to put them in the gate. And so when the draw comes and we end up with Champagne Room down inside, I mean, the only way for her to win this race is to be, as you know, be part of the front end. She's not going to race and rally. So she is going to go. Then you fold in the fact that Stellar Wind, if you go back to the races last year against Beholder, how did she beat Beholder? She took the race to her, and basically Espinoza and John Sadler recognized that they were not going to beat her by chasing. So clearly, John Sadler has to know, and Espinoza has said, that he is going to be aggressive with Stellar Wind. It's her last race, and there's really no reason to wait for anything. So you start to add this all up, and you've got Paradise Woods, you've got the Champagne Room down inside. If you watched Abel Tasman from her gate works, you get the sense that she's going to break sharper, and that Mike Smith is going to try to have her be part of things earlier, as opposed to having that insane rushing headlong into the race with one crazy move. So I think she'll be involved and establish position early. All this says to me is that this thing has got potential to be way faster than anybody expects, and that's going to play right to Forever Unbridled. And I've got every expectation that she's another horse that can be ridden to position. There's a lot of people wondering what Mr. 50's motivation was to replace Rosario, put Johnny D back on. I can tell you, I was at Oaklawn when they won the Apple Blossom, and Johnny was unbelievable on her that day. And I think he'll have a real good feel for what's happening in front of him and can ride Forever Unbridled appropriately. I think she's the right price in here too. You know, she's going to end up 9-2, 5-1. And I like that about her too. I mean, there's so many mojo horses going on here. It's a little nuts. I mean, Paradise Woods, who had every indication of being special at the beginning of the year, and then she had that mantle kind of snatched from her by Abel Tasman. Paradise Woods, I was out at Santa Anita in March. This is a different filly. I mean, she is a brilliant job, as typical by Mandela. He has taken his time, he regrouped, and he basically rebuilt her. So, you know, she's a different animal than she was earlier in the year. So this is a wonderful addition. And, you know, we're not even talking about nice horses like Mopatism and Romantic Vision and, you know, the rest of that field. But you don't really have to, I don't think. I'm playing that this race is going to have a faster pace than it looks like in the projector. And under that scenario, I want Forever Unbridled and Dallas Stewart, who is just seemingly so dangerous in this kind of a setting. Let's press forward, and still lots and lots to do. We'll come from the Distaff, and let's move into Saturday, guys. And I'm having trouble finding my page because I got about 4 things on the screen.
I think we want to hop into the Classic, and then from there we can kind of
work backward. There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, let's do that. Yeah, I mean, look, the Classic, a wonderful renewal. In my opinion, I think, it's not like last year where we had, the 2 big horses in the showdown. This year, I think each horse, even though Gunrunner has done nothing wrong this year, still doesn't seem to be meriting the sort of respect you think he would, at least getting the sort of praise you think he would. And, Arrogate coming in off of, 2 losses. But look, again, people want to, if they take a closer look at those races, specifically if you take a look at the Pacific Classic ran an enormous race, and we'll get into all that. Obviously, West Coast being the other big name in here. And so what do we make of all of it? Look, I could have easily said that I'm going to go with Arrogate because I think he was over the track yesterday, and I think you've probably seen, if you're on Twitter or if you pulled up any of the news websites, or if you listen to Steve's show, if you listen to any of the radio shows, he looked great. He looks good, and according to people who have been here and have seen him work over the track before, it's as good as he's ever looked over the track. So that's a positive sign. And so I could have just said, hey, look, Arrogate, that's all. But I'm going to spice things up a little bit. And look, I will make it clear that when I tell you who my pick is in this race, you'll probably roll your eyes, but at least give me an opportunity to make my case. I'm going to go with Pavel. I have never really, I've sort of liked Pavel. I've never really been completely enthusiastic about him. But looking at the body of his work, and there are only 4 races there, I can't help but think that there's upside here that we haven't seen yet. And so essentially what I'm going to be banking on, much like Steve just described there in the Distaff, where you could picture a situation where perhaps, you may think, hey, look, there are only 2 horses in this race who are bona fide speedsters, and those would be Collected and maybe Gunrunner going with them. I think this is the sort of race where you may have a first wave of speed followed by a second wave of pressers that go ahead and put on some more pressure as well. And so I think it kind of sets up for a back second, early third flight type horse. And that's where I think Pavel comes into play for me. And again, I'm interested in the fact that he's only run 4 times and that he's gotten progressively better. If you can kind of get past the Jim Dandy, which was just a really weird race, an oddly run race, I think Pavel is extremely interesting. The 116 and 110s that you see posted here, really solid. And as I said, I think he just has a higher ceiling than some of the rest of these. He also has developed what I found interesting, sort of a 1 good race, 1 bad race pattern you can see here. And really and truly, I wouldn't say it's good and bad. I mean, it's a one win, one loss pattern. So if you follow that pattern, I mean, maybe this is the spot. Maybe here's where we him to take that next step forward and win. What I was most impressed with is this Jockey Club Gold Cup, and since we're on the clock, I'm not going to go ahead and play the whole thing, but you had a runaway leader in Diversify. And nobody was catching Diversify. After the half mile, I mean, and him being loose, no one was catching him. And what you saw in Pavel in that race, to me at least, was impressive. For a young horse to be battling neck and neck, almost squeezing out the place spot, getting just beat by 3/4 of a length by Keen Ice. That was super impressive to me. And so I love what I saw from him there. It's one of those races I could see a horse like this building off of. And so, Pavel. That's sort of my price play. And look, I certainly wouldn't encourage anyone to bet this race and single Pavel and move on. This is the kind of race where I would say use Pavel in your exactas and in your trifectas. But for me, as I kind of alluded to, I like Arrogate. I think, as we might imagine, Bob Baffert would probably like nothing more than to send Arrogate out on top. And, Collected. Collected is the other horse in here, we mentioned, who has some speed, was on a loose lead in the Pacific Classic and ran a big race, take nothing away from him, but had things his way that day, and Arrogate still close to within half a length. And Arrogate, who, by the way, we have acknowledged, was not absolutely at his best in that first race back from Dubai, and maybe he was even a step slow in the second race back, being in the Pacific Classic. So if Arrogate is any better on Saturday, I think he's going to be really, really tough. And with that, I would say Gun Runner as well. I'm not going to, I can't take anything away from Gun Runner. All I can potentially say is that, he's run massive race after massive race, and this is his first time at Del Mar. Maybe he doesn't love it. There's not really any strong case that you can build against Gun Runner, I don't think, unless he decides to get into a real heavy pace battle with Collected, in which case it could take a toll on him. I mean, we saw in the Woodward that he didn't get the lead and still managed to make a nice move early enough to go ahead and draw off. But that field was certainly nothing like the kinds of horses he's going to run up against here on Saturday. So Gun Runner, I say respect, and I say you'd be crazy to completely toss him. I'm just going to go ahead and play against him in this spot. So that's kind of my take on it. The other horse that I'll mention will be West Coast, who is the 8. As far as West Coast goes, again, has really not done anything wrong of late. He's run 4 consecutive massive races. It really looks like Arrogate did at this time last year. His campaign has probably been a bit more grueling, to this point of the year than Arrogate's was last year. But he's won from off the pace. He's won on the lead. He's got tactical speed. I think that's a huge key here. If he runs to these last few races, he's right in the thick of it. So West Coast is another one that I would respect. And curious to hear what you guys think about it. Craig, I'm going to attempt to pass it over to you here in a moment. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
All righty.
Okay, can you see it now?
We got it.
Okay, so I'm kind of flip-flopping from the way that you saw the race. I see Gun Runner as the horse that I'm going to try and key in this race, and it's a lot of it is the way that he's looked here at Del Mar. It's another one that got here earlier than a lot of the other horses. He has the workout on the 30th, which was visually impressive. Asmussen and everyone else really liked it. I kind of think that this horse is similar to Paradise Woods, where it's a different horse this time of year than it was early in the year, and he's been having a great year anyway. The Equibase speed figures have been very consistent. I mean, you look from the beginning of the year, there's a 122, 129, 121, 126, 131. The other horses that are running these types of figures are collected the last two races that collected ran, and then Arrogate has run those kinds of numbers, except for his first clunker at Del Mar. But other than that, no one else has really been close to those numbers. And kind of in past years in the Classic, when the 3-year-olds have, I mean, 3-year-olds a lot of times will improve their number, and it could be a big speed figure number, but usually there's maybe one older horse that has big Equibase speed figures to surpass. I mean, this time you're going to have to really beat 3 horses, and I think that's going to be tough to do. So for me, I'm just going to, nothing special. I'm just going to key Gunrunner the most, play Arrogate mainly, and then I'm just going to, there's one horse that in the tries and supers that I'm going to throw in is this 3-horse Win the Space. And just because he's 30-1. I know that Joe Talamo does well in dirt routes at Del Mar. So just throughout the race card, some of the local jockeys that have good records on Del Mar Turf or Del Mar Dirt, things like that, when you're looking at the stats, those are types of horses I'm going to throw in tries and supers, because I think there are tight turns at Del Mar. It is a little bit of a tricky track. A lot of these other jockeys will have almost no experience on it, and so I think a local jockey that's been having success last year on the track can make a difference, and can't always improve a horse enough to win the race, but they can get him into the back end of the tries and supers. And so for me, this race, Win the Space is the horse that I'm going to throw in there to try to do that, just to try to spice up the exotics. Who were you high on in this race, Steve?
Well, I have to turn in the Express Bet wagering guide entry, and I do the Classic every year, and I ended up putting Arrogate on top and Gunrunner second, and I also, in structuring the $100 wager, I basically keyed the 2 of them, and the only other horse that I thought was a win candidate was definitely West Coast. And while, as you said, Craig, you look at these numbers, you look at the established figs, yes, a horse like West Coast has got to improve to beat Gunrunner or Arrogate. Both of them do figure to run their race on Saturday. But West Coast really does project further improvement. And where he is really within that ideal striking distance. And frankly, the pattern of 3-year-olds that has been established by Baffert into this race, you're winning 3 straight years with 3-year-olds. It's a fairly established circumstance, and I think it's very easy to see a horse like West Coast and project him as the alternative player. The other thing that when you get to this race, much like we talk about it at Derby, 10 furlongs is the different animal. And West Coast and Arrogate are authentic 10 furlong horses. I am not suggesting, and we've discussed this for weeks on the radio, that Gunrunner is not as viable at 10 furlongs as he's been at 9. And this racetrack is conducive to a 9 furlong horse getting that last furlong, given that you've only got one of the shorter stretches of a major racetrack, 600 plus feet. So this is not to say that I buy into the gun runner's not a 10 furlong horse. However, with Collected's presence and with the chance that there is, some authentic pace to this race, the two of them, and Gunrunner in particular, feel like he's vulnerable late to horses like Arrogate and West Coast. And I'll be very surprised. I suppose Collected, using that form from the summer, I guess he's a win candidate. I don't see him, but I understand for the people that are utilizing the Del Mar angle. It's very viable. Craig just talked about jockeys and who's particularly adept here. Kent DeSormo is, it's like the early 90s the way he's riding right now. It's unbelievable how sharp DeSormo's been riding, and he's always been murder down here. So there is a lot to those kinds of angles to take into account. And it's funny, Win the Space is a horse that I really like upstate, and going into that awesome again. And he ran a terrific race. I thought there was a moment when he was going to win. And I am a little miffed trying to use him at the bottom of the exotics, Craig, at the way he's run down here. I'm not convinced he's as effective down here, but I definitely agree with the concept. Other than that, I would just add that, a horse like Gunnevera, based on the training at Calder, Gulfstream West, based on the terrific performance off the extended break at Saratoga, he's gotten over a lot of, loose, sandy surfaces. So him coming here, this surface is going to be a little tighter, and I think he'll be moving late. And Gunnevera, an ideal horse that you want to use for fourth in the Super and fifth if you're playing the Super High Five. There's some interesting equations here that we haven't even mentioned. Muktahij, who seems to be in career best form. You'll have to make a decision about Churchill. I'm against him. Watched him out here this morning, his first day on the racetrack. He just looks so turfy. I'm not somebody that lines up against the Euros in this race. I like Toast of New York. I like Declaration of War. I chose both of them to win in their respective classic tries at Santa Anita. So I'm not anti O'Brien or anti Euro in this race, but he just seems like a completely misplaced animal in here. He would greatly surprise me, and I just don't see him. In fact, Galileo progeny, I saw the numbers. You can pull it up. They're over the board. They've not hit the board on the dirt in North America. So I think that this is a very defined edition of the Classic. I think it's going to be absolutely a perfect coda to a huge weekend. I mentioned the Express Bet wagering guide. Let me mention some of the opportunities that you've got, some of the pricing opportunities that go through Sunday. For those of you that are listening in for the first time, you could get a day pass for the whole Raceland for $5, a monthly subscription, $75, the quarterly, $199. And, we urge everybody, to give it a full trial. If you try for a day, you're not going to really get the full benefit of the product. And the more you use it, and the more you play with it, the more you're going to enjoy it, and the more winners you're going to find. So, this is obviously a great weekend to get started, but it'll take you, if you subscribe for a month and take advantage of the offer, you'll end up being able to play Thanksgiving weekend, always great racing, Thanksgiving around the country, Churchill and Aqueduct for Holiday Fest, and back right here, the Hollywood Derby and the Matriarch yet to come. So take advantage of the offers, and they're also at your ADW of choice at Twin Spires and at Express Bet as well. Let's press on and talk about one of the really fun races of the day. one of the races, and there's a lot of Breeders' Cup events both days that give you one of these equations, which is if it's not horse A, the favorite, like a Unique Bella or a Bolt Doro or a Separation of Powers or maybe Moonshine Memory, if it's not one of those horses, well then who could it be? And things get absolutely wide open right away. And Craig, talk about the Filly and Mare Sprint. You and I share an interest in a long shot. How are you approaching the 7 furlong standard for fillies and mares?
Right. So this is, as you said, a race where it's if it's not the favorite, who's it going to be? And it looks like it's tough to pick. For me, I'm just kind of basically going off a couple of angles that I always like, and it's mainly because of, as you said, this is 7 furlongs, and so a lot of times handicappers don't appreciate the difference between 6 furlongs and 7 furlongs, especially at championship level races. And those races can be different as night and day. And so since this race is at 7 furlongs, I like the number 14, Amy's Mesa. And the thing that I like is that the horse has been running on synthetic tracks. And so the races, it's won 4 out of 5 times. That's 7 furlongs on the synthetic. So I just think that's going to have this horse legged up well for running the 7 furlongs at Del Mar. I think the outside will be okay. I mean, it's not ideal, but at least I think there'll be a chance to get position to at least see everyone. And the other thing that I like about this horse is the most recent race that ran, the Presque Isle Downs Masters Stakes. That race has been a key race in the past for horses to win the Filly and Mare Sprint. And so, for all those reasons, that's why I like this horse. There's not going to be much buzz about it. I think the horse is going to go off in the 20-1 range, and so you're going to get a good price. The obvious horse is the one that you mentioned, Unique Bella. There are lots of things to like about this horse. I mean, the horse is, even before it ran, it was, talked about heavily. Lost its debut, but after that, she's, as far as winning, she's done everything right. The one problem that she does have is, you can see in the last race, she got off a bit slow, and in her debut, she got off slow, and she got in tight on the 2 races back. And so even to me, like when I saw her workouts, it even seems like even on her workouts, she starts a step slow, or can come out of the gate, just like half a beat off or a quarter of a beat off. And just at this type of race, I just think sometimes that can get you beat. And so she looks like on paper a great horse. It's going to be tough to beat, but there are some problems there that could possibly pop up. And then the other horse that I'm going to play is Bar of Gold, and mainly is because 2 races back the horse did run against Amy's Mesa and only lost by a length, so it's coming out of that Presque Isle Downs Masters race. And also the thing that I like is that to me, like you've been talking about Kent DeSormo, to me, Rad Ortiz Jr. just this last month has just looked so good on horses, and he just seems to be riding so well, just making his move at the right time. There's some big races where he's really just timed things perfectly, whether it's been a front runner or a come from behind her, and I just like the way he's riding. So, and this one's even bigger odds at 30-1. So those are the 3 horses that I'm going with in this race, and so I'll pass this over to Dan.
All right. You should see my screen now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to go with a horse that I don't think we've mentioned yet, and that's down on the rail, Karina Mia. Interestingly, as well, because Karina Mia, I mean, in terms of, again, class and back class, I don't think you could do much better than Karina Mia. You know, I think she's a bit overlooked coming in. She did win the Shine again in August, going 7 furlongs. And you can see here her last 2, obviously she hasn't won, but they haven't been bad races at all. This was 6.5 in the Gallant Bloom last out. I think she's looked great here as well in the morning. I saw her schooling earlier. It seemed like she was schooling for about an hour earlier. She was out here for quite a while. But I think she's looked great, and more than anything, I think the reason I like her is because I think the pace in this race projects to be pretty fast. We can click over here. Let me minimize that. True odds here in the pace projector does project a slow pace, but if you look at it, a field this big with so many horses, again, sprinting, and horses that we know are fast, they're probably, there's going to be a bit of a go for the lead. I would imagine Constellation, who we see here, projects to be one of the faster horses, is going to be motoring. And I did kind of want to show an interesting, I think we can utilize research. We talked about the research functions on Stats Racelines. I think we could utilize the research function here to show what constitutes, I think, a negative research, a research that might have you jump off a horse. And here's one that was kind of eye-opening to me. You see here, it's the first thing that pops up. First after trainer switch, moving to Bob Baffert, 61 to 180 days, only 1 win out of 12 starters. Now, 7 of those horses have hit the board, but you expect to see sort of bigger and better numbers from Bob Baffert. So off that layoff, again, just sort of a number that kind of struck me as being perhaps a bit low. You can also go back in and add other variables that, as we've done before. So we can go in here and let's say, for example, here we add graded stakes. So now we know first in the Baffert barn, off that layoff in graded stakes. We'll see what that yields. 0 for 1. Okay. This was not the search I did earlier. Let me redo that search. Let's take off the 61 to 180 days. And let's just see, first time with Baffert going right into a graded stakes race. And we've got, over the past 5 years, 9 starts, 2 wins, and 5 of the money finishes. Those 2 wins, book review back in 2012, winning by a neck. And then more recently, of course, we'll remember Muptahij winning just about, a month, a little over a month ago. And so, but overall, I mean, I just, again, the numbers kind of seemed, and again, small samples on both searches we did, but not anything that would inspire, I don't think, any additional confidence in the horse. And as I mentioned, I think to begin with, the pace will be pretty fast here, and so I don't see Constellation being able to gut it out. One other horse that I did want to mention is Finest City. A second here as I gather these notes. Finest City, right here. Did win this race, of course, last year, putting up the 110 Equibase speed figure. Also with Finest City, doesn't really have recent form over the dirt at Del Mar, no recent form at least. But if you go back a little bit, you see here the maiden win here by 8.5 lengths in August of 2015. And then came back in October and wins the allowance optional claimer there by 3.25 lengths. So 2 really, really strong races there. And, of course, in the Vanity, I'm looking at the wrong race now. The Yellow Ribbon finishes 4th here. So, look, 1 race not quite like the other 2, but nonetheless, seeing a little bit of that back form at Del Mar is also a positive, I thought. And look, she's been off for nearly 4 months. It remains to be seen if she can come back off that kind of layoff. But I will point out that if you look here, she's come back off the layoff, off 2 and 3 month layoffs in the past, and she's run really, really well. So Finest City, again, I think is one that you don't really hear much buzz about her, but I think she's one who's also going to be sort of tactical early to middle part of the race, and will have the ability to close in to at least, to my eyes, looks like a race, a pace that'll be pretty fast. So those are my thoughts. Unique Bella, haven't said much about. Steve, I know you'll probably mention her, so I'll just ask you, what do you think about this, the way this race shakes out?
As I introduced it, to me, it's one of the kinds of races where you are, depending on how you feel about the races on either side, of the sprint, you've got the turf sprint ahead of it, you've got the filly and mare turf after it. It's part of a pick 4 that starts with the juvenile fillies. So depending on how you're betting the multis, you may lean on Unique Bella, and there's nothing wrong. If you want to do that, I'll give you all the support that you might want. To me, she has not given you the paper that you look for, like a Drafang, for instance, something to say, well, she's definitively better. She's established her form. You look at her speed figure there. She hasn't yet had the opportunity. That doesn't mean that you necessarily feel that she's a really vulnerable favorite. I can tell you the cheap players are going to think that she's vulnerable, but she may just demolish this field. There's a concern that she might get hung out wide. It certainly didn't bother her last time. So she has, I think, every potential to come through the way in which she's been advertised. At the same time, you got some very good, accomplished fillies and mares in here. One thing that Lafitte Pinkai has been absolutely driving home is the fact that no 3-year-old has won this race, which is a fascinating circumstance, because there's been some good ones, but they run into hardened cases, like a Sky Diamond, for instance. And you better take Sky Diamond seriously, because she's a street fighter. You're dealing, all you got to do is, pull up the numbers for Bill Spar, as fearsome an outfit on this circuit as there is. I'm using her. Amise Mesa, I've had my eye on for months. And everything from a pedigree standpoint says that she absolutely can translate her form to the dirt. She drew beautifully, gets to survey the entire field for a mid-pack stalking trip. Contreras drives me absolutely crazy as a rider, but you know what? In this case, you just got to believe in him. Karina Mia, it's funny. I think Karina Mia can revert to a kind of a one-turn effort in here and be a part of this at a price. And the outside character that I trust to run a good race is Highway Star. Rodrigo Abillo's New York bred. She's absolutely the type that historically has run well in this race. You think about some of the Bill Kaplan's mare, for instance, that was had a terrific campaign that culminated. Musical Romance was her name. I couldn't think of her name for a second. Highway Star has got that look about her. One of these horses that's getting good as an adult horse. Horses don't fully mature until they're 5, and we talk about that so often with the males. It's just as true with fillies when they become mares. And sometimes you can have a 4-year-old or even a 3-year-old. They have they have a cycle. They have female issues. When they get to maturity, they have a tendency to be held in abeyance, and all of a sudden their racing instincts are recaptured, and they become tough as nails. And that's why it's hard sometimes for a 3-year-old at this time of the year to beat older fillies, older 4-year-old fillies, or mature 5-year-old mares. So this is a wonderful race, and if it's not going to be Unique Bella, and I put Unique Bella on top. I went 11, 14, 12, 1, 10. This is a terrific race. There's other horses to consider as well. Certainly Curlin's Approval. That's a great story. Happy Altar, one of the great characters around the sport. Finley's Lucky Charm showed a new dimension. You go back and watch her replays and what she did at Churchill. Who'd have thunk that she could sit fourth like that and then come with a run and come with finish? That was surprising. By the Moon is absolutely another honest hard tryer. Michelle Nevin and of course Samantha Siegel, JMS Stables. So if it's not going to be Unique Bella, this thing becomes quite wide open and should be mighty entertaining. Looking forward to this edition of the Filly and Mare Sprint. Let's keep going, and I think we're going back to Craig.
I think what I'll do is I'll hold it for now. I'll run through a couple of thoughts, and then I'll pass it back over to Craig right after this, if that sounds good. The Filly and Mare Turf. So let's do that. Lady Eli, obviously the story in this race, will be the sentimental favorite of many, including myself. I think my handicapping, whether consciously or unconsciously or subconsciously, probably when something like, let me try to find a reason why she'll win, and there won't be anybody in this race, any horse in this race that'll beat her. But alas, I did find a filly who I think will be extremely, extremely tough, and that's going to be Grand Jeté, the 8 here. If you look at, I mean, really, you just look at these last couple of races, there's a story that emerges. And first off, she comes out of the Flower Bowl, where you can see here War Flag and Decida finished ahead of her. 6 of 18 winners of this race here, the British Cup Filly and Mare Turf, have actually come out of the Flower Bowl Stakes. So it's definitely one of those key races in terms of horses coming out of where you look and might say, hey, look, there's a good chance someone coming out of this race it will probably emerge at the Breeders' Cup. And so that's just one thing. But if you look at the way she's run here, all you got to do is take a look at these prior races. She has never been on the lead. And if you watch the race, go back and watch it, Javier basically just took the lead because no one else wanted it. I don't know that she wanted to be on the lead. And nonetheless, she was there and was there most of the way and was just caught late. And so that being what it was, I went back and kind of looked at some of the other races that she'd run prior to that. And this one is truly incredible. If you haven't seen the Beverly D and her run in the Beverly D, again, this trouble indicator you can look at right here. I'll pop it up and I'll play it just so you get a sense for it. And again, this is a little slow, so I apologize for it. Grand Jeté will be the 5 here. Let's go ahead and hit play on that. So first and foremost, what you'll notice here is that, let me see if I could skip ahead a little bit. The pace is fairly slow, and if you look at where Grand Jeté is, you will see that she's going to have a bit of work to do to get through, and she does. As soon as she finds some room, there she is right there on the rail. You got to just take a look at this move she makes here in the Juddmonte colors. At least to me visually, this is one of the more impressive races that I've seen. So she was hardly on my radar until I actually went back and watched this replay. But look at this. Look at this trouble. I mean, she has absolutely nowhere to run. Jostle, taken up. And then just watch what happens when she gets some running room here. So there you go. All that trouble. She loses by half a length, is right past Desita right here, galloping out. And so when I look at that race, and when I look at the fact that Desita will probably take some money, I'm pretty excited about Grand Jeté's upside here. Again, just watching a ton of replays, I think you get a lot of insight into how these horses run. Desita, her Flower Bowl was a very strong race, all things considered. I think War Flag just got the jump on her. Otherwise, if they run that race again, Desita probably wins if she moves a little earlier. But she, again, ran a big race and is always very brave. She's usually all out, I will say, at 1.25 miles. Her races at 1 1/8 miles, which is what this will be run over. Let me move over to Desita so we could actually take a look at her. Where is she drawn? All these numbers are starting to run together in my mind. She's the 7. If you look at the 1 1/8 mile races, they're extremely strong. So at the distance, she's got 2 of them at 1 1/8 miles. You can see right here the Canadian, the 122 is her highest Equibase speed figure. And then you look back at the Diana, which of course she won by a nose at 1 1/8 miles. 2 of her absolute best races run in 1 1/8 miles. So, I certainly respect Desita, but I just think that Grand Jeté, if she gets the kind of trip or any trip, truthfully, that's better than what you saw there in the Beverly D, I think she's extremely dangerous. And again, I don't completely toss Lady Eli. I will say just other things to keep in mind. You have both Desita, in fact, Desita, Lady Eli, and Grand Jeté all trained by Chad Brown, who has won this race 3 times, as has Sir Michael Stout. And so between those 2 trainers, you've got six winners here in this race in the filly and Mare Turf. For me, those were the top 3. Again, I proceed with a little bit of guilt because Lady Eli has certainly done nothing wrong and really, hasn't really given us any reason to doubt her. But, and this may be sort of twisted thinking, but when I think about Lady Eli, I typically think of, at least recently since she's been back, look at these finishes: 3/4 of a length, 3/4 of a length, nose, head, half a length head, and then 1.5 lengths, and she could have probably won by about 3 or 4 lengths in the Boston Spa. You know that she was totally cranked up to go out a winner at Saratoga. There's something, and again, maybe I shouldn't question her, but there's something about how big she ran there that kind of makes me think that was her big race. That was her big, kind of last hurrah. And I want to be wrong sentimentally again. I want to think that she's got one more, but that race was sort of uncharacteristically, if we can call a 1.5 length win dominant, it was uncharacteristically dominant, I think, for Lady Eli. And so, again, you're looking at a much tougher field. I mean, look, the runner-up here, Dickinson and Rocco Rojo. I mean, solid horses without a doubt, but nothing like the she'll be going up against here on Saturday. So anyhow, those are some of my thoughts on the race. I will once again pass it back to Craig. Let's see.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
You got it.
Okay, so I just like you, because of basically the horse shouldn't even be alive, much less racing at the level she's racing at. Lady Eli is an easy horse to root for, and she looks good just because the numbers that she's running. When you look at the Equibase speed figures, 121, 120. 120, 122s. That's her peak range. The class rating of the race is a 123 because a lot of times the Euros are tough to beat in this type of race. The one thing is I just do want to show one negative angle, and it's I mean, you kind of want to take it with a grain of salt. I don't think where I put it here. I'm not sure what I did with it. I'll have to look. But lately, so in the last 365 days, horses coming from overseas haven't done very well at Del Mar, and it was only like 24 starts, but they just haven't been winning at all. And so I think the horses that you go with this year, you have to go with prices, and also I think sometimes horses that maybe are doing something unusual. And so one of the horses that I like here that's doing that is Wahida. And so when the thing that I like about this horse that's so unusual, I know that they have been wanting to find firm ground for this horse, and so that's one of the reasons why they're bringing it to America. I like that the horse came in. You see that it has 2 Keeneland works, so October 12th and October 24th, and then you see that the horse came just a couple days ago on the 31st and had a workout, and I think it's the only horse, that's coming from a last race overseas that had a workout on the Del Mar course. I mean, I could be wrong because I haven't gone through the PPs of every horse, but for sure this is unusual and it's different when you're comparing it to, all the other horses coming from overseas. Another horse I liked was number 4, Zapesa, and this one is mainly just it's a jockey play and a jockey trainer play. Joe Bravo, for the last year, has done well in these types of races, and so when you look at his record in turf routes, when they're graded stakes, he has 29% winners and 130% ROI. So he's riding well on long shots in these types of races. And then also when you just look at him with the trainer, they've only had 7 starts, Michael Stidham and Joe Bravo, but he's won 43% of the time and hit the board 86% of the time. So I just think that this is a good jockey trainer combo to play in this type of race. And then the other horse I like is the horse that beat the horse that Dan is high on. And one of the reasons why I like it is as much as you like Grand Jeté and you think War Flag had an easier trip, the horse still dug in and was game, and this is a type of horse who I think may step up again, because this horse, when you look at overseas races, the horse was here when it was first starting out, running 97s, 96s, then ran the 112 speed figure, then it was off for a long time and came to America, and then you see it ran a nice race, then it was just running these numbers, and then it came back with the 111. So I kind of think there's another upward move in speed ratings for this horse, and so I just think that horse can pop up War Flag at the 12-1, and also you can look at the jockey trainer Shug when he uses Jose Ortiz. They are 77 starts, 18% winners, but when you see the ROI plus 47%, so that means that they've had a couple prices that have popped up. So I kind of like that angle too as well. Who are your top choices, Steve?
Well, you pretty much have narrowed it down. I mean, in terms of the major players, to me, with Lady Eli and Grand Jeté, who I picked first and third respectively, and Zapesa I put in actually I'll use in my tries. I picked her fifth. The 2 horses I'll mention, the right price to play with on Saturday is Cambodia. Tom Proctor, of course, who won a Distaff with One Dreamer. Proctor bringing her back here, and if you have not seen her performances in the Yellow Ribbon and the John Mabie, you may want to pull those up, because she tore through this course with her 2 best career performances. Yet another 5-year-old in the fall. This is a established pattern in the sport, and in the hands of Proctor, it doesn't get much more dangerous. She looks fabulous physically, the best she's ever looked, and Cambodia is a horse that I'm going to play in all slots, above and under Lady Eli. Queen's Trust, it's amazing that we haven't talked at all about the Euros. Last year, Queen's Trust was key and helped me hit that pick 5 that was made it an amazing weekend. I think that she's up against it from a pace standpoint, but do not be lulled into thinking that she's off form. She's had some real legitimate excuses through her Grade 1 campaign that include, of course, things like the Yorkshire Oaks, where she had to face a Naval. In the Nassau, she ran against the Winter and the other good classic runners. In the Prix d'Opera, she really just never got going, and certainly didn't like the soft turf. Another thing that you can use as a legitimate reason for her off performances. So I do not discount Queen's Trust. Not from, I don't think she is as viable this year as I did last year, only because she's not going to get the pace that she likes. But we can't go through these races, particularly the turf events, and not at least glance at the Euros. I know some people are making a case for Pascal Berry and the Flaxman filly Senga. She's okay. To be honest, I won't be all that surprised if we end up with the same trifecta combination, not necessarily the same 3 horses. I think Lady Eli on top, but I won't be surprised if we end up with Lady Eli Avenge. We haven't mentioned her. She's going to be winging it on the front end again for Mandela. It's a very entertaining race. Rhododendron, who everybody was so looking forward to Rhododendron and Hydrangea, and you didn't get Hydrangea. I don't really get Rhododendron in here, frankly. I don't think she's going to be on any tickets. A complete mystery horse is the South American, the Birdstone filly that Gary Mandela has, Birdie Gold. I did see her on Sunday morning out, kind of tearing around, looked pretty comfortable. You really never know what you get with these South Americans, and they're always a monster price. I'm sure one of these days, one of them will run well. Philly Mare Turf, very, very nice, and just another great wagering opportunity. No matter who you like, we got to pull up. I've actually got a 4:30 meeting. If there's nothing else, fellas, and give me maybe a best bet each before we go. Dan.
Hey guys, sorry. I think my microphone was muted. I do apologize for that. So my best bet is a horse that, well, first of all, I would say Grand Jeté is probably my best bet. But if I had to give you a number 2, it's a horse that I've been on all year. A little concerned about the draw, but all in all, I think the pace is going to be fast enough, and it'll set up for him just perfectly, and that's going to be Practical Joke in the mile. The dirt mile, that is, of course.
Right, on Friday. How about you, Craig?
Yeah, I still I'm gonna the horse that I'm really gonna key is still that first race we talked about, that Catholic Boy. I really I just like everything I've seen in the morning, and the price is gonna be right, and so I'm gonna take a big shot with that one.
I'll mention in terms of a most likely, it's not clever, and it's not going to be a price, but Ulysses, I'll be surprised if Ulysses gets beat in the turf. And I'll give you not necessarily a winner, but a horse that's going to run a big race at a very square price and could win, could end up second and be the key to your exacta, your try, your super. That's American Pastime in the sprint. Go back and watch his performance in the Gallant Bob. This 3-year-old and 3-year-olds have a very good history in the sprint. He's absolutely a horse that is dirtied up from that race behind Cold Front. Is he good enough to beat Drafong? Is he good enough to beat Roy H. and Imperial Hint? Those are the other 3 horses to me. I don't know, but I'm going to key him with those other 3 horses because he's going to be the right price, 10, 12, maybe 14 to 1 even. So as a exotic price key, American Pastime.
All right.
There you go. Fellas and everybody, thanks so much to everybody that came along. And again, I made one mistake. The 2 ADWs where you can get the discount on Stats Racelands, TVG, and ExpressBet as well. And we appreciate everybody joining us. Wish you the absolute best of luck. And remember, it might take you 12 races. But if you hit in the Classic, I can tell you a few years ago, I was sort of bumping along, and I probably was even for the day. And we got to the Classic, and I saw Fort Larned. I liked the way he went to the track, went and beat him in a try, and came home a couple grand richer. And that was after 2 days of sort of kind of stabbing blind without a cane for 2 days. So you $400 try 5 times. So it just you just cannot get flustered. And also remember, Friday and Saturday, this is not a moratorium on your abilities as a horse player. These are the most difficult races of the year. Even the races where you've got what looks to be an overwhelming favorite, and even if the overwhelming favorite wins, there's no telling who's second, third, and fourth. And you might have bet the favorite and known he was going to win and come away with nothing. That is not unusual. You do not think that you can't play this game if you don't have a good cup. Because believe me, come Monday or Sunday or Wednesday next week, the money you win, it'll spend the exact same as the money you didn't win Friday and Saturday. So best of luck to everybody, and we appreciate it. We'll be back with you during Thanksgiving lead up to some of the great racing over the holiday coming up, and it's a racing holiday for all of us. We'll thank Craig Walker and Dan Tordjman. Follow Stats Racelands on Twitter. Utilize all the tools, including the chat room. Everybody will help you and answer your questions. The entire development staff who continues to listen to your suggestions and improve the product to make it better for you so that you can win at the races, and hope that's exactly what you do. Enjoy it, everybody. Talk soon.
Thanks, Steve. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you. Yep.